on how to choose the right legal tech solution. Before we get started, one more quick question from our end. Please, if you are participating in the webinar, keep your microphone on mute while we're having the presentation, just to make sure that there's no disturbance. But that doesn't mean that we don't want you to actively participate, and that's quite on the contrary. We would love for you to use the chat function whenever any questions that you may have come up. We will answer the questions towards the end of the presentation. We have some time reserved for that, so really don't hesitate. But without further ado, I'm going to get started. So first, quick word about myself. I'm Vivienne Clement. I work as a product manager at Legartus. During my time at the company for about 3.5 years now, I've done market as well as competitor analysis. And throughout this time, I've quite well begun to understand some of the bigger dynamics and some of the bigger changes, as well as the more important providers out there in the market. So I hope I can share some knowledge with you today. Regarding the agenda, so we're going to get started with looking at the different stages of the contract lifecycle. So maybe as a quick side remark before we go on, the presentation today will be about legal tech providers in the contract lifecycle. That doesn't mean, however, that some of the bigger and higher learnings that I want to share with you today do not apply to other legal tech solutions. So if you are looking into, for instance, a solution for spend management or matter management, then you can probably learn something today as well. But once we've looked at the stages of the contract lifecycle, we're going to go on and look at some relevant legal tech providers in those different stages. Then we look at the differences between implementing a specialist and an all-in-one solution. And last but not least, we're going to give you a demo of our own software, so you get an insight into what an AI-assisted contract review actually looks like. So let's start with the stages of the contract lifecycle. In this image, you see in the gray bars at the bottom that we have separated the contract lifecycle in 3 bigger stages. The pre-signing stage, so everything that happens to a document before it's being signed, the actual signing of the document, and then eventually anything that happens to the document after its signature. Of course, there's many different ways to define contract lifecycle, and we're not arguing that this is the right way. This is the way that we want to show you today to be able to discuss the different providers. So how did we subdivide this? We actually, in the pre-signing phase, we subdivided between contract drafting and negotiation. So contract drafting, what's it all about? This is when you, as an organization, you're drafting a contract that you then want to send to the other party for signature. This can be an extremely short process where you just go through the internet, you take a document, you put in the contracting parties, and you send it out. But as you probably also know, a contract drafting can also take considerably longer if you actually have to do manual drafting yourself. Also with the negotiation, there's different lengths of a negotiation that can happen. So as soon as you send out your document to the other party, you've actually entered the negotiation. It can be very short. It can be that if the other party doesn't have a lot of negotiation power, they're basically required to just sign the document or not to sign it. But as soon as the parties have a bit of more equal negotiation power, what will happen is certainly that your negotiation can take a few days or even months. Moving on then to the signature. So signature, as you know, you can still sign your documents, of course, in paper, but e-signature and digital signature is certainly on the rise here. And then document analysis. So with document analysis, you're also, like in a negotiation, you're going to be looking at the content of your documents, but here the difference is that you will probably be doing this in bulk. So instead of just looking at a single document at once, when you will engage in document analysis, you actually want to find out in a large quantity of documents some information that's relevant to you at that point. A typical use case when you will go into a document analysis phase is, for instance, when there's been a regulatory change. The GDPR in the last couple of years has required companies to basically look at all the signed documents that they have and then make sure that they are still compliant with the regulations as they are today. So after having had this overview, we're going to look at some providers in each of these phases. There we are. So in this overview, let's start by looking at the bottom. What you will see is we have the same phases that we've just explained to you. So we've got the pre-signing phase, the signing phase, post-signing phase, and then also all phases. That means we also have providers that actually will cover all of these phases at once. But let's start with the specialist providers and also start at the ones completely on the left-hand side. There you see document automation. So what is document automation all about? This is when you as an organization, you want to make sure you can create documents to be sending to other parties really quickly. Typically, you can think of a software where you as a user will fill out a short survey. For instance, it will ask you who the contracting parties are. It will ask you how much is the contracting amount, something in that regard. And then it will fill this out to you and prepare for you a ready document to be sent out. As you can see at the top of this column is that we've qualified this as a without AI category. That is not to say that none of these providers actually use some AI, they certainly can, but it's not as advanced AI as will be required for some of the other phases that we're going to look at. And the reason for that is that many of the document automation rules can actually be hard-coded, and they do not require extra artificial intelligence. In this column, what you'll also see is that most of these providers are actually definitely based in the UK and US. That also means that a lot of the focus in legal tech applications still today is very much on the English language. But what is nice to see is certainly that Brighter is an EU founded organization, and they actually have gained a lot of traction in the last couple of years. So you do see that some more local initiatives are getting traction. Moving on to the next phase, contract drafting. So in contract drafting, what you'll see is that we have categorized this as a without AI category. And the reason for that is that contract drafting, as we define it here, are tools that will actually help you when you get into a stage where you have to do manual review. So it's not anymore about just quickly taking a document from the internet. It's really about you drafting your contract manually. And as you can imagine, it's very easy for inconsistencies to come in when you're drafting a contract. For instance, if you've been drafting a contract and referred to a paragraph that was 2.0, but now you change the paragraph to 3.0, your reference is no longer correct. There are today tools out there that can help you find these inconsistencies, and those are the ones that we've listed here. Again, there we see some nice European initiatives coming up like Henchman or Donna. Over to the automated contract review. That's where we as Lagartas are located. So what we do is we are in the stage of the negotiation where you want to make sure that every incoming contract doesn't interfere with any company rules that you may have. So as a user, you're required to make sure that you know what's in the document and that it's acceptable to your organization, basically. For this, you will require advanced AI, because if you have a tool that assists you with this, it is required to actually understand your content of your contract properly. What is also interesting to point out here is, again, the strong dominance of the English language in this field. So the providers you see here, all are specialized in the English language. We as Lagartas are one of the few exceptions, and not just from this list, but really in general in the market, that offer an AI solution pre-trained in multiple languages. In our case, that's English and German. What's also interesting to point out here in this category is the different approaches that each of these companies are taking towards the challenge that we have with an advanced AI. As you can imagine, an advanced AI will not work perfectly from day one. That's simply just not where we are. But to go on with this challenge, these companies have some different approaches. We at Lagartas, but also Thought River and Legal Shifter, we find it important that the human remains in the driver's seat and allows basically the human to override any decisions and to instruct humans how to make changes in the document. Black Boiler is actually a nice example of taking quite an experimental approach there. They really seek to replace the human work entirely. So this is really as if you had a lawyer filling out all the information for you inside your document. Logix, on the other hand, is completely on the opposite side of the spectrum. And what they will do, they actually do not feel comfortable showing any mistakes to their customers. So they actually have employees inside their organization that will review all the results of the classifier or the AI before it's actually pushed to their customers. As you can imagine, however, that comes with a bit of a delay in how much time you have to wait. This is typically 1 working day for them. So over to the digital signature. Again, this is not involving any advanced AI. This is simply where you can make a legally binding signature on any document that you want to sign. You see here a list. Again, vast majority of providers are actually based in the US. But nice in the middle is Scribble. Scribble is actually an organization here in Switzerland that also keeps all its data inside Switzerland. So you really see these kind of local initiatives coming up, making sure that they do not basically interfere with any rules that you as an organization, for instance, as a bank may have. Moving over then to document analysis. So just as a quick reminder, again, this is where you're going to review documents, but you're going to do it in bulk. So you're going to review a lot of documents at once. For this, you will certainly need some advanced AI. This is, again, where you need to understand the content. So these applications all work with advanced AI. Again, strong emphasis on English, but what's interesting is that some of these providers will actually let you train in different languages yourself. So instead of you receiving a pre-trained AI, you can train it yourself. A typical provider of this is Kira. And then last but not least, we're going to move over to the document management or the contract management providers. So here you find providers that actually will cover all phases. And instead of basically trying to become specialists in one field, they say we're going to cover it all. And for this, they will work partially with AI. So all of the providers you see here have been on the market, have gained quite a good name by now, I would say, and all of them work with AI. For those of you that were wondering, DocuSign is indeed in this column and not in the e-signature space. Although you might know DocuSign mainly for its e-signature, it's certainly a market leader there. But by now, this company has certainly expanded fully to an actual contract management provider. So with that, that was a short overview. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate. Happy to answer them at the end. But for now, we're going to move on. And I will show you some of the differences in the implementation of a specialist versus an all-in-one CLM solution. So first of all, the big difference between them is that these contract management solutions that I've shown you all the way on the right-hand side, they offer functionalities of all stages of the contract lifecycle. This is different from specialist providers. They will focus mainly on one or some specific parts of the contract lifecycle. That has its influence on your existing workflows. For a CLM solution, a contract management solution, they will actually intend to change the way that you manage contracts in your organization today. Of course, it's intended to change for the better, but you will change the way that you've been handling your contracts so far. And that's generally different for specialist solutions. They will actually try to integrate into the contract management practices that you have today. And so you can continue to manage your documents as you wish. Then we go over to the number of stakeholders involved when adopting a CLM solution. As you can imagine, most departments in an organization work with contracts. And if you want to get the maximum out of your CLM solution, you want to make sure that the solution is actually adopted company-wide. Working with two different kinds of CLM solutions in one organization generally leads to nothing else than a headache. Then that's, again, a little bit different for specialist providers. How is that? Because as these specialist providers are not intended to fully change your workflows, you can actually start adopting them one by one department at a time, basically. And that then, of course, has its influence on the implementation time. If you want to integrate a CLM solution, you will generally require not only a lot of support from your IT department, but also if you want to make sure that all your legacy documents, everything that was signed before you implemented the solution is integrated, you have to reserve some time for that. That, again, different for specialist providers. Normally, this will be a shorter implementation. And because these tools are meant to integrate with your existing workflows, it's also typical that you will actually have a way quicker implementation time. Now, to be very clear, this is not to say that a CLM solution might not be the right thing for your organization. Quite on the contrary. If your organization has the willingness and the capacity to actually work on implementing a full-fledged contract management solution, then that's great. But we do definitely want to point out that you need to ask yourself before you go into the buyer journey, whether you actually have the capacity to solve basically a big issue of contract management in your organization. Because what could be is that if you have some burning pains that actually are quite urgent and you want to solve them quickly with limited resources, you might certainly want to look at some specialist providers that we've shown you today that could actually solve your problems quicker and probably also for a fewer price. So with that, it's time for your opinion. We'd love to hear after this overview in which phases of the contract lifecycle you actually see the highest potential for your organization. So you can find this information by using the QR code. We've also just posted the result or the link into the chat, so you can find it there as well. So we're seeing the results come in. So at the moment, it looks like contract negotiation and review is having the highest vote, but it's competing with all of them. So meaning you're looking for a solution that covers all. And good, we still see some changes going on. At the moment, we have contract negotiation and review at 36%, all of them at 29%, contract drafting 21%, and contract analysis at 14%. So that is certainly an interesting one to see. I'm glad to see that as we're doing a demo today on contract review, that's also what your organization has a need for. So you'll certainly be showing or getting an insight into what that looks like. What's also interesting to see is that all of them, so meaning you really feel that you have a potential in the contract management space, is certainly there for many organizations as well. And I think this really, also fully speaks to what we're seeing in sales calls, that either you have an imminent problem for a specialist provider for which you will then actually find a good fit with us, or you will say, no, actually, let's start with a contract management solution and solve all the problems that we see in a longer time period. So with that, thank you very much for your participation. That also means that we're going to get ready for the demo. So before we start with that, quick overview of what our application actually does. So an AI-assisted contract review tool like ours will basically do the following. You start by identifying and analyzing the clauses in incoming contracts. So you want to make sure that you know from a contract that comes into your organization what's in it. This can be either a template that you've sent out and has been amended, or truly like a fully new third-party document. Then the software will compare whatever it found inside your document with your corporate standards. So you've previously saved your corporate standards into our application, and then we will be able to make a comparison. If we find problems, we will instruct the users to amend problematic clauses. And of course, we will apply the same legal and quality standards to every review, so you can be sure that the review will be done at the same quality level as if it was done by one colleague or the other using the same application. So still a quick word about our solution and what I'll be showing you today. We at Legardis, we have 3 different modules. We have a module for non-disclosure agreements, a module for data processing agreements, and then we have a contract essentials module. And what this does is actually it finds the most essential topics in all contract types. You can typically think of liability or warranty, and that's also the module, the last one that I will be showing you today. In addition, we have 2 interfaces. We have a web application that includes what we call our contract playbook. The contract playbook is where you as an organization will start your user journey by putting in all the corporate rules that you have for specific contract types. This is a process that's fully assisted by us, and that typically can range for a couple of hours to a couple of days, depending on how much alignment you actually have in your organization. For this presentation, I've already prepared a playbook, of course. And I won't be showing you that today, but instead we will fully focus on our Microsoft Word add-in, because our Microsoft Word add-in is where your review will actually take place. And without further ado, I'll then show you what that looks like. So I'm going to move over to Microsoft Word. And I have prepared for us today a general terms and condition. So this general terms and condition is basically a document of 4 pages. You can imagine this comes in from your counterparty. You haven't read it before. And all you have to do basically is here click on one button at Legardis, and it will open our add-in. So just to give you a bit of an idea what it looks or what it means, an add-in in Microsoft Word is like an app that you have on your phone, but it will actually interfere or be able to correspond with your document. So what you'll see later on is we can make changes to the document, we can find things in the document. So it's actually quite cool, small tool, I would say. So let's start. First thing that I'm asked to do is to indicate which contract I'm reviewing. In this case, I have prepared my playbook for general terms and conditions. After clicking continue, the analysis starts. And what you'll see is, although this is a 4-page document, the analysis is incredibly quick. So that was it. That was all that the AI needed to really read the entire document. There's an overview of everything I have to do And we're going to look into that in a bit more detail in the next page. Here we are. So as we mentioned, we at Lagartus, we want to make sure that you as a human reviewer always feel that you are certainly in the driver's seat. And that's why we make sure that everything we show to you is very clearly indicated as tasks. So in this case, I have 4 open tasks, and because of the way I set up my playbook, I already completed 13 tasks automatically with the AI. So let's have a look at the very first task that was found in my document. Here we are at the concept of contractual penalty. Most of you are familiar with it. A contractual penalty basically means that you, in an agreement, agree to actually pay out a certain sum of money at the advance whenever you breach an obligation in the contract. Most organizations are not very big fan of this. And so in this case, I've set it up in such a way that the software tells me that this clause is unacceptable and needs to be deleted. So let's examine 2 sentences that were found by the AI. The first sentence, let's have a look. First sentence already tells me purchasers shall be entitled to a penalty. That doesn't look good. And the exact same thing is shown in the second one. So what I can do is I can quickly click here on the delete icon, and the relevant paragraph will be deleted. But actually, most of you will be familiar with working in track changes to indicate any changes you've made to your counterparty. And for that, I've just enabled track changes, and I can simply select the other sentence that was unacceptable. And as you'll see, we fully support track changes as well. The software has quickly analyzed the changes I've made. And as you can see, it recognized that I've now just deleted the problematic sentences and that my task is hereby completed. So all I have to do is click and go on to the next task. There we are. Warranty claims. So this is a concept of warranty that most of you are also familiar with. And of course, if your warranty is being breached, you can make certain claims. Now, what we realized at Lagartus is that we need to be highly customizable. We need to be able to cover all those needs that your organization may have regarding more complicated topics like a warranty claim. And that's why we created a concept that you can see here. We know that this clause, we found it, but we still require some verification to be done. And what needs to be verified is exactly written here. So what my company requires is that I have to ensure that all repairs have to be done by the supplier at their own costs. So I get a clear instruction from my legal department on what to check. Now I need to check if this requirement is fulfilled in the contract, which I shall do here in this one sentence that was found. We jump to the relevant part in the document. And after reading it shortly, what you'll see is that the supplier has to repair or replace without any cost to the purchaser. In this case, requirement fulfilled. So all I have to do as a user is simply indicate, yes, my requirement is fulfilled, and I'll move on to the next task. Again, we talk about warranty here, but of course, warranty has many different aspects. And here we talk about the period of limitation. So how long is my warranty valid for? Again, my company has a certain requirement here. It wants to make sure that all the warranty periods, also those for repaired, are at least 36 months. Okay, in that case, I again will have a look at what the AI found. First sentence, I see that actually it expires after 24 months. That is, in this case, insufficient. Same thing in the second sentence. So in this case, is my requirement fulfilled? Answer is no, it is not. Now, what the software provides me with is my company standard clause right away available here. So if I want, I can simply delete all relevant text and actually insert this text. Of course, in this case, it's an easy fix and I'll just do it directly in the document. So here I replace it by 36 months. What I certainly also want to point out is that this kind of comparison with number of months and things like, in that direction, basically, this is certainly something that we're working on very hard internally to make sure that we can automate that even further. So that actually our software will be able to automatically spot that the 24 months is insufficient and flag that to you as a user. So you as a user basically have even less work than you have today. For now, however, I'll confirm that the requirement is fulfilled. There we are. Last task, force majeure. This is whenever circumstances happen that are beyond the control of a party. Typically, you can think of wars or pandemics or natural disasters. Since the pandemic, this certainly has gained in importance. So let's say in this case, my company actually wants me to always include force majeure in every contract or general terms and condition I conclude. What we saw with our software is that this clause is entirely missing from my document. Now, what the advantage is that I basically have a very easy button here to just insert my company standard clause by just clicking copy. I find a place in the document to insert it. As I know the document, there's a part on liability here that I will include it with. Again, the AI sees that I made a change. It's analyzing, and it now found that I have inserted the force majeure clause that was missing. So all in all, my task was completed once again, and I'm done with the review that I've prepared. One last thing to show you. So once my review is completed, you will also see here that we have a full history in our software of who completed which task. So in this case, I worked on this alone, but I actually can also send this document to a colleague of mine. And for instance, if I wasn't able to complete all 4 tasks, then my colleague from the legal department can take over and make sure that we finish all the tasks that are required for this specific document. That was a quick demo that we have prepared for you today. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to add them into the chat at this stage, because I'll still quickly wrap up the presentation. Some last key takeaways. I'm convinced that actually going grocery shopping, we have some common wisdoms, and they're not so far off actually also when buying a software. I think first and foremost, don't go shopping when you're hungry. We all know that we don't make the best purchasing decisions when we're hungry, and I don't think that's very different from when you're actually looking for a solution. If your need in the organization is too big and you really are in dire need for a tool that will make your work more efficient, you probably don't have the capacity and the resources available to actually bring the implementation of a legal tech solution to a success. This does take time, and as intuitive as tools may be, you do have to get used to them. So make sure that you actually don't wait too long. Next, you obviously need to choose if you're going to go to a supermarket or a farmer's market. In our case, do you need a CLM, an all-in-one solution, or actually do you need a specialist provider that can give you a quick fix sooner for the problem that you're urgently seeing? Then next, make a grocery list. This is also important. You want to consider what your organization needs actually before you talk to providers. And that is because maybe you can see some cool features that might actually give you the impression that all your needs are met. But then when you start implementing it, you might actually realize you're missing one important feature that actually you need in order to be able to work with the tool. So really do think about what you need before you talk to providers. And last but not least, try a free sample. Test your favorite solutions, and also don't forget to involve all the stakeholders that are relevant. If your tool is meant to be used by the legal department, but also by other departments, make sure the other departments also are able to actually use it before you fully implement it into the organization. So with that, we're through with the presentation, and we still have a bit of time to go through your questions. Let's have a look at what we find in the chat. All right, we have a question from Miriam. For in-house legal departments that are just starting to look into legal tech, would you recommend to go for a partial solution first, or directly look at a complete solution, covering all the phases? I think this is extremely difficult to decide, especially when working in a global environment where every change needs a lot of alignment and change management skills. I think it's a very valid question. I definitely think it's also one that obviously depends a lot on your context. So what I can certainly tell you is if you feel that the organizational readiness is not there, especially if you say it's a global company, meaning multiple companies or countries need to be aligned, then it might actually make more sense to start small and then grow from there. But if you say that, I think especially if your needs in the organization are so urgent that everyone realizes something has to change, then that might actually be the right time for the organization to really sort of put in the project management and put in the resources that are needed to look at a larger solution. So I think it depends mainly on how big is the need in your organization. And if you say the need is not as strong, that it would basically get all these countries and all these subsidiaries aligned, then potentially a smaller solution might be a smarter move. We have another question from Mark. Is your software able to review and assess a contract with changes made by a customer? Yes, Definitely, we are working in Microsoft Word. So if your customer made the changes in Microsoft Word, we're able to actually find those changes. Also, what we will do is we can actually support PDFs. So Microsoft Word has a functionality where you can convert PDFs into Word documents. So it's really quick. If your customer made a PDF, you just convert it into Word, and we will actually then also be able to review it. We have a question from Frank. How else is your software doing with very complex contracts or contracts that have a lot of annexes? Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, NDAs and DPAs are on the easier end of contracts, but the contract essential module that I've shown you today, we're certainly training this on complex contracts, and we're getting satisfying results. We, of course, don't cover all of the complex matters. That's just, we only cover the essentials. So that means that yeah, basically very contract specific topics we don't cover just yet. But when it comes to complex contracts, we're certainly tackling that, and annexes also should not be a problem per se. Then a question from Adriana: how the standards and the company clauses are pre-inserted, and is the AI actually learning, or does it merely automatically do pre-programmed actions? No, we absolutely have a learning AI. So actually the way that our AI has been trained is that we have in-house teachers that train the AI every day. And basically the way that it learns is that we get more data, we train on the data, and we improve our performance. So it really is a continuously learning algorithm, and it barely follows any pre-programmed actions, I would say. So from Ludwig, I see the question that we did not mention, Icertis and Serion Lab. Do I have any particular view on those suite providers? I would say that they're both they're both also quite established. I know that Serion Lab certainly works with an advanced AI as well. Icertis, we heard some contradicting stories there, I must say. I think Serion Lab certainly want to look into. With Icertis, I would make sure to verify if they're working with AI, if that's actually something that you're interested in. And especially important when looking into providers, you want to make sure that you know which languages they support, because many providers will say they support many languages, but then when you end up looking at the product, you actually have to train it yourself. If you have the capacity to train, then you certainly, that's great. But one thing to keep in mind is that training in AI certainly is not an easy matter, and you really do have to plan resources and time into it. So we have a question from Mark. Do you also have law firms using your software, or only larger in-house legal departments? So the majority is certainly in-house legal departments, because of the way that we've structured our product. It certainly fits best to the use case of larger in-house legal departments today. That is to say, however, we do work with law firms. So they do use our software as well. And where our tool is especially interesting for law firms is if you work with many different clients that have many different requirements, then our way that our product is set up, you can create a playbook for each individual client. So when you upload a document, you can actually say, this is from client A or this is from client B, and you will see the respective rules. So it takes out a lot of the memorizing, and it actually allows it to see it directly in Microsoft Word. So Fabian asks if German and French and any other languages are covered by the AI. Today we cover German and English. The next language we want to tackle is certainly French. All right, good. I think we've covered all the questions. If you have any more questions. All right, Mark asked about the pricing of your software. I am not part of the sales department, so I can't give you very concrete estimates here. But what I can tell you is that, we price our software based on the number of users that you have, and then as well how many of the modules that you, of course, license from us. It ranges from, basically the 4 digits, the lower 4-digit numbers, but it can of course increase depending on how many users that you're using. Good, we still have a bit of time. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them right in the chat. More than happy to answer them. You can also ask them in person if you prefer that. You can unmute yourself, that's no problem either. All right, if there are no further questions, then we certainly would like to give you also the opportunity to get in touch with us in case you want to basically discuss your legal tech challenges with us. Here you can find also my details in case you're interested. We're more than happy to help you out, whether it is related to Legartas or other providers, more than happy to do so. We got one more question from Lucia, and that is, what's the difference between the modules for legals and for purchasing teams? At the moment, there actually is no difference in the way that we have our modules defined. So actually the interaction between legal and the purchasing team is as follows. The legal department will actually set up their rules into the contract playbook. So that's always done by the legal department, and they will put in their instructions in such a way that actually most of the work, most of the review that's done today by a legal department can then probably be done by their purchasing department instead. So all of this is customizable, and what our tool allows you to do as a purchasing member of the purchasing team is basically to review a document quite independently, and only in case you really have questions that are not clear based on the instructions that you got from Legartas, that's when you would actually contact your legal department with additional questions or things like that. All right, and Fabian asked if we have an integrated contract management system. Actually, we do not, and that is at the moment so that we actually are a solution that you can use with any contract management solution you may have. And that is because, as you can see, we are available in Microsoft Word. So if your contract management solution allows you to work in Microsoft Word, you can just open up our add-in and just go ahead and review using the Legartas. So there's really no, as I would say, no interference with any contract management solution today. And you can basically combine us with any contract management solution that allows you to work in Microsoft Word. All right, good. I see the thank yous coming in. I think that's time for us to then probably wrap up. Nonetheless, I really do want to ask you if you have any feedback on the presentation, or if you have ideas on what we can do as a next presentation, please don't hesitate to add it. We have in the chat a link as to a survey, quick survey. If you like the presentation, there we have it again. So please share your feedback. And other than that, I want to thank you very much for taking the time today. It was great having you here. And don't hesitate to reach out with questions, ideas, or anything. Great. Have a lovely night, and hope to see you soon again. Bye, everyone.